All right, hello everybody, and welcome back to the wonderful world of Two Hoegs Are Better Than One, or THABTO, as I know everybody that follows this channel and this show has taken to calling it. I've heard. I think there'll be t-shirts and everything else. Tom, my brother, video game design. How is it?
Good. Do I have to do my disclaimer, or are we just going right into it?
No, absolutely. Do a disclaimer. I didn't give you a biography here. So my brother works on video games, which is one of the reasons that we talked to him about them. He works on them at High Moon Studios, which is a subsidiary of Activision. And Tom, what has Bobby Kotick asked you to say on this podcast?
Bobby Kotick has not asked me anything in particular.
Sure.
But I did get an email from our legal department.
Ooh, okay. What did they ask you to say?
Said that I'm okay. To do what I've been doing, which is, this. I'm an Activision employee.
Mm-hmm.
These are my opinions. These are my opinions, not Activision's.
Mm-hmm.
All opinions are my own.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing they said, I'm not allowed to comment on basically the stuff that I work on or the company at large.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm currently working on Black Ops 4.
I thought you just said you're not allowed to talk about what you're working on. Do I have to call Bobby?
I think I'm allowed to say public stuff that I work on.
Okay, great. I don't want you going into Activision jail. Okay,
it makes me think of the like IOI servitude things.
Oh yeah, exactly. A little Ready Player One reference. I like it. I can imagine if that actually happened, where like the entirety of the internet were up for grabs, that Activision and Electronic Arts and some of the bigwigs, they would be able to pull out some resources to try to go get that. What were they collecting? Keys, something along those lines.
Keys, yeah. Ultimately, trying to get the egg.
Sure. Exactly. And it makes so much sense. If you haven't read or seen Ready Player One, that was all nonsense. So welcome to THABTO. We like to have a lot of nonsense. Nonsense. With that disclaimer out of the way, I think we can hit our first topic. How do you feel about Activision's public stock position, and would you or would you not be trading in its shares? No? Okay. All right. Well, I think what we've done in past episodes, and I think would be a good idea for this one, is that we just dive into what we're playing. One of the reasons I like to have these conversations with my brother is because he does have that video game background. He went and he got a video game design degree. He's worked on Ratchet and Clank. He's worked on Call of Duty. He worked on Destiny. And so it's very enlightening, at least for me, and I hope you find it the same way if you're listening to this or watching it on YouTube. It's very enlightening to me to have him go and nitpick other people's hard work, because I think that works wonderful. No, he loves video games as much as I do, and he always has some really great insights. So, Tom, I see here we've got on the list that you're going to talk about what you're playing right now, which is a little bit of a divisive game that only came out this weekend. Why don't you tell us about that?
It's so funny. I don't know things that are divisive because I just I don't.
Oh, we're going to cover your lack of social media presence at the end of this episode.
I guess that's
you're
fair.
A ghost. You're a ghost.
We in the previous episode we talked about how I don't hype things because that makes them terrible.
All right.
And so I don't typically follow games much. Anyway, I've been playing Wolfenstein Youngblood.
Yep, they like the word blood in their titles. Youngblood's the new one.
A friend of mine at work basically asked if I was interested, and I had thrown it in. I think you probably saw that it was in my wish list on Steam. I'd thrown it in there at one point going, it looks interesting, but I didn't follow it at all. And so I read about it same day and was like, yeah, totally, I'm down. It's like $30. Said like it's a sort of dynamic-ish campaign. Like you can run around and do whatever you want. It's got progression and character abilities and different things. And so I was like, all right, that sounds up my alley.
Right, which is generally things you like. For the most part, as kind of a tilt disclaimer, you like filling bars. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, I like filling bars. I like unlocking things. I have still not found a good term for this. Like I use the term character building, but that's exactly wrong because it sounds like a narrative thing, and I don't mean that.
Right.
I mean literally like building your avatar in an interesting way to be very powerful, whether that's, he's really good at sniping or he's got magical fists or whatever it is. Finding those synergies and those mechanics that work together to make a really strong build.
And if you really love it, that can give replayability because you can try it a different way if the levels are built for it.
Right. So, I've been playing Youngblood. I played it with this friend at work a couple times. Mm-hmm. Actually, we tried to play this weekend, but we were playing it on PC, and I guess he didn't realize that his home PC was not quite as powerful as his work PC.
Sure.
And was not able to run it at home, and was like, well, guess I'm out. So I played it a little bit by myself yesterday.
So you got both. You got both angles of it, because as I understand it, I don't have this game. I haven't played this game. This is, at least on the outside, built for cooperative play. So they talk about two people, and if you're playing by yourself, you have a bot with you.
Yes. So it is. I think it's definitely built for co-op. I think the no more revealed than in the sheer number of doors that require two buttons to be pressed simultaneously to open them.
You're going to have to turn a key at some point to either launch or stop a nuclear missile from across the room.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. So it's built for cooperative. Now, I've played the modern Wolfensteins. Obviously, that's not the case for those. You also mentioned it being dynamic, and what I've heard in reviews is that it's not what you're expecting. It's a little bit closer to something like a Destiny or a Far Cry or something like that. What is the actual moment-to-moment gameplay like in this particular Wolfenstein?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things is it's similar to a Destiny or another looter shooter in terms of guys have health that you can visually see, and your damage numbers are kind of going up over time.
Oh, are you popping numbers out of these guys? I actually haven't seen clips.
I don't know. I'm trying to remember. I don't know if numbers pop out of them.
Okay, all right.
But they have numbers like where Destiny used to show you the level of the guy. Like Destiny 1, it's the same thing. Like he has a little number in that sort of slot. They also have a system of basically what they call barriers, which are kind of armor. There's two kinds, and different weapons strip off different types of armor sort of better.
Okay.
So you're kind of trying to cycle between weapons that are good against whatever armor type you're fighting.
Okay. So it's that sounds wildly different from my experiences in the current Wolfenstein kind of modern era. So this is a different thing for them with Youngblood.
Yeah, I'd say so. Definitely. You're kind of prowling around a bunch of different places. There's like a stealth aspect to it that you can engage in, where you can get behind guys and take them out. The character that I'm playing as, the power that I'm using, there's just like 3 powers, 2 of which are kind of available at the start, and 1 I haven't revealed yet. But the one that I'm using is I can go cloak basically for a short period of time, so I can use that to kind of get behind guys and then assassinate them.
Is the stealth a heavy component of the game then?
No.
Okay.
It's my little, like each time you get into an engagement, you can kind of pre-combat with like 1 or 2 takedowns if you're good. You can also use the cloak to kind of change your position in an engagement so that you can get to drop on guys, but it's not heavily stealthed. The idea of a heavy stealth co-op game sounds horrible.
Well, we learned that lesson, right, with things like The Last of Us, where eventually the designers just said, yeah, he's running in front of the light. We're not going to do anything to you because that's not fair.
Right. Yes. The rule in general in stealth with AI is just like, your AI are invisible to everyone but you.
We're trying not to break the immersion, but it's better if we do. I think when they relaunched the Wolfenstein series, I think it was New Order, where I popped in and it really had a strong narrative. It had some really kind of emotional beats to it. What is the narrative of Youngblood like?
It's mostly some sort of, I want to say 80s fan service.
Okay.
Basically Wolfenstein's gone missing. And his
BJ
daughters,
Blazkowicz.
Sorry, BJ Blazkowicz has gone missing, and his daughters are going to look for him.
Okay.
They uncover a little bit of information that seems to indicate he's in Paris.
Okay.
So they're in Paris. And
the whole game is there.
They're just, yeah. And then I think, and then they're just doing stuff like they get little side missions, or they're helping the resistance with this and that in order to ultimately theoretically find their father. I don't know if that's where it actually goes.
So from that description, I think I understand why it might be divisive, is that it sounds significantly different from what came before it, and that's always kind of a difference maker for how you might perceive the game. We've talked about expectations kind of informing how a game feels to you. I think that reminds me, and I think you mentioned it when I talked to you about this earlier, of some of the experiments that Ubisoft was doing with the Far Cry series, where they would have the one where it takes place and you're fighting 80s dragons or dinosaurs or whatever, and the most recent one where it's in like the post-apocalypse. A blood dragon,
yes.
right?
Blood Dragon, and the most recent New Dawn.
This feels like that to you?
Primal's technically kind of like a fully priced spin-off of 4.
Yeah.
Because they did a lot.
Well, I might be one of the few people that loves Primal.
I also love Primal. But I love crafting and survivalism and stuff like that. So that game is very it's in that survival craft. It's like survival craft light, and I really dig that.
Well, so right now, what is working for you on this game? What's really making it work for you?
I think the combat's solid. It's just kind of fun to run around and shoot guys in. It's like there's not a lot of first person looter shooters actually. I mean, and there's not really that many in general. And so this is like, okay, well, here's Wolfenstein's take on it, which is different than Destiny, which is different than
Borderlands is the primary one that jumps to my mind.
Borderlands would be the other one, yeah, but they haven't had a release and they're releasing later this year, but haven't otherwise released anything in a while.
Well, every time I click on a YouTube video, I am reminded of Borderlands 3's imminent release. So they've spent some ad money on YouTube primer videos.
It's fair.
But
I wonder how expensive a channel that is.
But it sounds to me like, would you say then that it's better with a buddy, though, than an AI bot, or is it okay with the bot?
I think it's okay with the bot, but I think it's definitely like built for co-op and just kind of like, I don't know, the gameplay is not so mentally taxing, so you can kind of like have a conversation while you're doing it. It's like, it's the same way I feel about Destiny. Once you kind of get into it, it's like, this is a good, we can chat and joke about stuff while we're also killing aliens, or in this case, Nazis.
That's really the trick, isn't it? Is finding that perfect spot where you're engaged enough in what you're doing to enjoy it, but you're also not so engaged that you're taking a half hour to go listen to dialogue boxes, cough, Anthem, and things like that. And if that is working for you, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, the game actually does something that I've thought of from a development angle for a while in terms of games that are co-op and trying to communicate story, which is literally you pick up, I think, audio logs and written note logs and whatever, and it just puts it in your inventory as like you have a thing to read when you so desire.
Go check it out later when your buddy's not standing there.
Yeah, when you're not holding everybody up. And so I think that's a smart choice, though it means that I haven't read much of it. And then once that block of reading gets big enough, I usually have a hard time getting into it.
It becomes too much of a homework assignment, and you say, forget it. I'm sure it's fine.
Yeah, sometimes when I play like Mass Effect and or games that have kind of a big codex type thing, I'll be like, all right, I'm going to read this one section, or I'm going to read for like 20 minutes or whatever, and then I'm going to go back. And then just like, eventually I will have digested this.
I know that feeling, and I do know getting behind the horn, as it were, when you've got one of those codexes from BioWare, and you're just like, yeah, I'm sure it'll be fine. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Well, what doesn't work for you on this game? I can certainly imagine a certain amount of frustration if they do have those levels above their heads. Is there a level where you either get one of those kind of red bars and a skull, or you can't damage them, or something along those lines? Because that tends to bug me in those types of games.
I have seen red skull enemies, and I have seen areas that it's like, you probably shouldn't be here.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, that exists. That doesn't super bother me.
Okay.
I like the kind of idea of sort of soft borders instead of hard borders. So rather than just having a locked door that there's like, this doesn't open until we're ready to let you in there. They're like, oh, you can go. Those guys are going to murder you.
Okay.
And you can make that decision. And at least the red skull guys that I've seen, at least they're not Destiny red skulls, which is like, this guy just doesn't take damage and you can't do anything about him. This is like, no, if you're really going to put some concerted effort in, you can take him out, but we wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah, I love that. Hey, if you're willing to put in the time, you might get something fancy. I do a little bit of that in Dragon Quest, which I'm going to talk about in just a second. But so at the end of the day, this game, a lot of people said it's trash. A lot of people said it's not. It's great. It's the internet. So on that spectrum, you're digging it right now?
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it, actually. I wish I was really enjoying it when I was playing it co-op, so I have to find another person to convince to play it with me.
I can't imagine where you'd find another person interested in video games.
Well, it's on the PC, so I have to convince you to buy it on the computer.
You really do. Although I thought I read it, there was some version, which evidently is not the one that you got, that came with a buddy pass where you could.
There is the deluxe version. I wonder if I can upgrade to that at this point, because originally I was buying it with this guy, so it didn't really matter.
Sure.
But now that he's like out, I know there is. Yes, the deluxe version gets you a buddy pass.
Okay.
For an extra $10.
Oh, yes, I would have fronted that.
Basically means they can play it with you.
Well, okay. Well, we can see on that. We can see on that. But otherwise, if it is something you're going to be doing, I don't know how long it is either. Since it was, as you say, it's a $30. It's kind of a half price entry, an experimental one at that. It might. I suspect it is on the shorter side.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, certainly I've gotten a lot of side quests recently. It says I've played it for 7 hours.
Oh.
So
okay,
I would guess it's probably in the 20 range.
That's more than I thought it would be. All right. Okay. Well, you've convinced me to at least look into it.
Yeah. No, I think if we did play it together, we'd have some fun.
All right. Well, on that note, talking about long games, I was going to use that as a segue to talk about what I've been playing this weekend on and off, which is the brand new Fire Emblem game, which I know you haven't played, you haven't bought, Tom, but have you enjoyed the Fire Emblem series on the whole?
Yes, I love Fire Emblem. I've been playing it since Game Boy Advance. I remember actually when I was at an internship, and I had the Game Boy Advance that you could flip closed.
Ooh.
And I think it was Game Boy Advance. Might even be. Yeah, that must be. It's not before that.
No, the Game Boy Color is the one unit, and then the Game Boy Advance is the one with the flippy.
Well, the original Game Boy Advance wasn't, right? It was like one piece, but then they eventually made one that you could like flip closed. Anyway, I remember Fire Emblem, one of their like sort of back of the box features in it when it was a mobile game or when it was a handheld game was it's constantly saving, so you can turn it off anytime and you come back and you're right where you were.
Nice.
So I could be playing and then just like snap closed my Game Boy, and when I came back it was ready to go. So I would play it in bed while I was on this internship as sort of my wind down for the night, and then like close it up. And I was doing it I was doing it in like 38-minute to hour increments for a few months.
Well, it would be a very long trip, as best I can tell, with the new Fire Emblem, which is called Three Houses. I think my first memory of Fire Emblem is actually, I believe I was introduced to the series in Smash Brothers, either with an assist trophy or something like that, and I didn't recognize the series name because I think the really early Fire Emblems they didn't bring over from Japan. So I too have enjoyed the series. I like strategy games. I was a big player of the Shining Force series back in the day. And certainly I played Advance Wars and all those kinds of things, Final Fantasy Tactics. This new Fire Emblem is a great entry point. It is very different from previous Fire Emblems. It is designed around a calendar system, much like Persona. If you're familiar with the Persona series and what they've done for 3, 4, and 5, you basically have a calendar. You have certain events on certain days. And in this case, you're a professor at a school that's teaching tactics. That is run by the church of this country. And so you are constantly, essentially, once a week, you've got the opportunity to do battles or to walk around the monastery, which is the school. It looks a lot like Hogwarts, talk to people, try to increase their motivation, and get them ready for a different day where you're going to have instruction. And you're going to teach them how to build up their skills for specific things, weapons they're using, the bow or the axe, or potentially healing magic or attack magic. And it's a list of things, like 10 of them. And those are separate. Those skills are entirely separate from their experience, which they can really only gain, as far as I know so far, which is I've probably played it for 10 hours or so at this point, in actual battles. And that's how they raise their levels. And when you get to certain levels and you get to certain skills at the same time, then you can essentially take a test to get entry for your character into their new class. And they've got beginning and intermediate and advanced and some kind of question mark class past that. And it is very immersive. It is very interesting. It is the first time that I can remember, and I might be wrong on that, but it's the first time that I can remember where you have some component of a Fire Emblem game where it is a three-dimensional space and you're walking around it and you have all that three-dimensionality. And I think that's a lot of fun. It does appear to be ridiculously long. It's one of those things where I said I played it for about 10 hours. I'm in, I think, the second month of what we go through. It might be a year like Persona. I don't know. There might be something more advanced than just the school as part of the plot line. That wouldn't surprise me. Certainly some of the hints as to what people are saying suggest that there might actually be a real war, which, in all honesty, is what I would anticipate for a story like this. Mm-hmm. But it is very compelling, and it's in particular very compelling with the characters. I was very worried, actually, because you have to pick between one of these three houses to start the game, And you get to meet everybody. You get to see kind of their profiles and their dossiers and things like that. But I was worried there's so many characters that you wouldn't get a good feel for them. And it really took very little time. They were very smart about this, of introducing you to the house that you pick's characters and having you talk with all of them. And you get a very quick kind of understanding of the nuances of how they operate. And some of that is built like a game that I know you're familiar with, which is kind of a Valkyria Chronicles style, where they have likes and dislikes, and they like certain people and they dislike certain people, and they can get certain powers if they're standing next to a man or standing next to a woman and things like that. And it all has created a very kind of, I'm the professor of this school, and this house in particular, and I know all these people and I know what they like, and it's kind of cool to make the lazy person and put all my effort into her and get her up to an intermediate class before anybody else, and it's very interesting. And of course, the big trick for Fire Emblem is, and always has been, you can lose people. If you lose them, they're gone. And so the combination of all these choices and all these decisions about how you're going to teach them, and then going onto the battlefield and really having to be concerned about whether or not you lose them, is stressful, but in a way that I really, really like. And I think you'd really get a kick out of it. I have been enjoying it a lot. But as I said, you pick one of the houses. I've played for 10 hours and I'm in month 2. I don't know, one house campaign might be 40 or 50 hours, and then another house campaign, I don't know how different they'll be, but they'll be different at least somewhat, will be another kind of chunk of change in terms of time. So it does seem like one of those games where if you're looking for something to spend $60 on that'll last you some time, Fire Emblem's a good choice.
How do you lose people during these like battlefield exercises? Are you guys going and doing actual battle work, or what's going on?
That's a great question. So some of the battles are mock. So it'll actually tell you, hey, we're going to have the 3 houses fight against each other, almost like a Quidditch match in Harry Potter. And it'll have a box at the front of the battle that says, you don't lose people. They go to the infirmary on this one. We're not killing people at our school yet. The rest of the way the school works is that essentially once a month, the head of the school, which is actually also the head of the church, says, you guys are going to have a mission this month. And the very last day of the month, we'll tell you what it is. And I think the first mission, without giving any major spoilers, is that there are bandits in the pass, and you have to go get some bandits. And that's going to be a real battle. You're going to take them out. You're going to be essentially overpowered for the battle. And you're, as the professor, going to take the field with your students. But you can lose them in that context. And so it is stressful in that you have to have those battles, and also you can fall behind the curve. And I was worried about that, like I get worried about it in Persona games, which is, if I make enough wrong decisions, do I just get completely hosed off of the curve of wherever I should be on what's happening in the main story. I saw today, actually, that one of the things you can do on the weekly activity, rather than walk around your monasteries, you can choose to pick a battle. You can have a battle, and then one of those battles, at least for this particular week, was something that you could play in various locations around the country, and you could essentially grind out some levels. So I used that to take a couple people that were level 2, and it was telling me that the end of the month battle, you really needed to be at least level 5, and I said, okay, as is the case in all the Fire Emblems, let's make sure that guy with the bow who doesn't have any kills gets some kills. So you soften him up, and then you let him finish off some bandits, and hopefully he grows up in some levels. But it's not that tense in most circumstances at the school. It is that tense when they essentially do something else with bandits or the like. And you also have some cutscenes about some guy with nefarious intent is walking around and going to do something. And I'm sure it'll be melodramatic. And I'm not sure that that'll necessarily be the best part of the game, because one of the things that I really, really like how they've done is the dialogue between characters, between you and a character, amongst 3 different characters, and how they all interact. And like I said, it's really actually building up a rapport of your house and how you feel about all these students in a way that I wasn't expecting. It's much better written than I would have expected for something like this.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
So check it out. Yeah, absolutely.
No, I'll definitely check it out. I love Fire Emblem. I think the question for me with Fire Emblem always, and this is, I used to be very completionist, and I still am to a point, is like, how well does it handle telling the story when characters die, since presumably they can't be there to say their lines? Are those lines just gone? Do they get handed to other characters that are basically unkillable? How do they manage to tell the story, or are they totally okay with, no, you lost a lot of people, your story sucks?
I think for the most part, they're telling the story through you as the professor and the head of your house. In all of the battles that I have currently played, it's a lost condition if you lose you or your house head. And that's where a lot of the story is getting told. And then the rest are flavor. I wouldn't want to lose any of them because I love them all now. But it's not where the primary story of the bad guy wandering around the country and something about the church and something about the school is happening. That's all characterization and kind of light storytelling about how they feel about their own families and the kingdom that they left behind, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
But I love it. Definitely check it out. I am not the first person to say the new Fire Emblem is great. It really is. One thing that you will like about it in terms of design is that it's super zippy. You have that overhead camera. You go and you attack. The attack is instantaneous. You're back on your strategy map. There is no loading anywhere once the battle starts.
It goes and does the Fire Emblem side view, do a cool animation, pop back out, or it's all done on the map?
No, it's brand new. It is technically all done on the map insofar as you can zoom right in and see everything, and they've got some new components where you can attach battalions to people, which also in the graphics gives you a bunch of people surrounding you and your hero units and things like that. But it just zips in, you do your attack, and it zips out. It's on a 3D kind of 3/4 view, almost like a Pokemon kind of perspective. And they do their attack and they pop back out. And there's a lot of different widgets and who's-its and what's-its that go into that. You can do specific attacks that increase your percentage chance and everything else. But it's a very intuitive experience, and it's one that feels nice and snappy when you get in there.
Cool.
So that's what I've been playing mostly. I also wanted to talk just briefly about just the general kind of summer of Switch here, which is it was Fire Emblem this week. It was Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 last week. And then for me personally, I know this was a multi-platform title, but it was Dragon Quest Builders 2 the week before, which is a dark horse candidate right now for a really high showing on my Game of the Year list. I know you've been playing Marvel Ultimate Alliance. I know you have Dragon Quest Builders 2. How have you felt about kind of the Switch games in the last month or so?
They kind of surprised me, really. Like, I'm looking for Fire Emblem. Obviously, I haven't played that yet. But Marvel Ultimate Alliance caught me off guard. I like I said, I don't really watch these things, and I just happened to be out shopping and was like, "Hey, what's this?" I loved X-Men Legends.
X-Men Legends, yeah, that was a game.
And then I'm just trying to make sure if that's the right game.
That was an Ultimate Alliance type game.
Yeah, that was the one that preceded Ultimate Alliance,
mm-hmm.
and then Ultimate Alliance became a thing. But basically, the concept of these this dungeon crawler with 4 superheroes.
Mm-hmm. And dungeon crawlers were more popular when Ultimate Alliance was a thing. I remember all sorts of different types of dungeon crawlers. I really loved the EverQuest dungeon crawler and the Baldur's Gate dungeon crawler, or Dungeons and Dragons at least.
Yes, Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, one of the really early ones. And then Baldur's Gate 2, I can't remember it had a subtitle, but I don't Shadows of something. Or...
Hey, I don't remember the EverQuest one at all. It had some words.
Champions
from
of Norath.
Nice. All right. Well, you get the 2 gold stars for this particular episode of THABTO.
I loved console dungeon crawlers and playing couch co-op on console dungeon crawlers. Did that a lot in college. Really had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah. Well, and Marvel Ultimate Alliance, I know I've been playing it with my girls. I think you've been playing it with your boys. It's a fun couch co-op game that we don't often get the kind of anymore, right?
Yeah, it is. No, actually, like I was saying, I was pleasantly surprised by Ultimate Alliance because I have such good feelings about that series, and this one's like kind of so far from the previous entry. I was like, oh god.
Yeah, it's been years.
And I was pleasantly surprised. I'm like, God, they don't make games like this anymore, and these are so cool, where you can be all the different heroes, and they all have their different moves and abilities, and like that's just really neat. Just having like a big cast of guys that you can play this game as. That's just really, really fun.
Yeah, and if you're interested in the MCU at all, and you're excited about Endgame or Infinity War or anything else, it really leans into Infinity Stones and Thanos and some of the stuff that you'll recognize from those movies in a way that my eldest daughter really liked, my wife really liked. It's a lot of fun. It's not doing a ton new necessarily, but you get to play as these Marvel characters in a way that is intuitive for really everybody involved at every age level.
It's funny. I can't decide which direction it is, because it's like I think they're leaning into the MCU a little bit, while at the same time we as a group understand more about these because of the MCU, because we weren't big comic book readers.
Yeah, no,
and
you
so
and I
like
weren't. Yeah,
when Marvel Ultimate Alliance or X-Men Legends or whatever did all these stories, we're like, who's this guy? Oh, okay, but he's a bad guy in this particular person's world or whatever.
Right.
And oh, this person's from a completely different universe and stuff like that. And that was like, in that time, it was like, okay, I'll try to follow as best I can. And now it's like,
introduce me to Moon Knight or whoever.
Now it's just like, nope, I get it. This is, this person's daughter, and this is their other daughter, and they're trying to take over the universe, and
Well, and to their credit, they still have like Elsa Bloodstone, whoever that is, just jumping in and saying some Van Helsing type lines, and you're like, all right, you're like a vampire hunter, I get it. But no, it's a lot of fun. I do recommend it if you're at all interested in those kinds of things. It's it's a simple game. It's mostly light, heavy. Throw some specials down. But if you like those comic books, if you like the MCU, I think it's a well done game.
Yeah, it really seems to be. I've been really enjoying it.
And then the last one that I mentioned here from the Summer of Switch is Dragon Quest Builders 2. Which I had no expectations for whatsoever. I liked the first one well enough, but it didn't kind of move the needle at all. Dragon Quest Builders 2 has been stunning in how much additional depth and systems and systemic behavior and RPG elements they have added from the first one. It might be one of my favorite games of the generation when all is said and done. I've put in about 20 hours on it now, and I have a ways to go, but it is utterly fantastic. How long have you played it at this point?
Like an hour, maybe.
Okay, so
I bought it and Marvel and some stuff on Steam, kind of in the same sort of shopping trip.
Oh wow! Okay.
And so I was kind of trying to do a bunch, like trying to play all of them and check them out. And so Dragon Quest got its hour or whatever, which is like enough to get past the pre-prologue.
Right, the tutorial before the tutorial starts.
So I don't have a good feeling for it.
Okay.
I played the first one a little bit. Also didn't have a good feeling for it.
You got to get into these. Well, hey, I'm happy to table the discussion of the intricacies of Dragon Quest Builders 2, because I really do think after you get a chance to play it some, it'll be a great THABTO conversation. But what I do want to say right this second is, if you're at all on the fence on Dragon Quest Builders 2, get it, because it's fantastic. And even on top of all the things I've mentioned, which is all the great building and all the new systems, it actually has a kind of fun, at least involving, RPG element. It has a lot of dialogue, way more dialogue than I thought it would, and I'm reading the dialogue out loud to my family, and so I have to have a little bit of lemon water with me when I do this. But it is, it's a really, really great game, and I would recommend, Tom, when you get a chance to play it some more, that you just remind me of that, and we'll have a more in-depth conversation about the 100 different systems that they now have running as kind of an open world builder simulator thing underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right. Well, before I get into the last game that I want to talk about, which is Judgment, I know that you've been playing another kind of smorgasbord of games from Ubisoft and from some other folks. What have you been playing? What is interesting? What do you want to share with the THABTO viewers, listeners?
Yeah, I'm so like we haven't done this in about a month, I think. So
that's right. And whose fault is that?
That's yours. And actually, I think it's both of ours.
Shots fired.
I think some weekends I was unavailable. You were out of town for like 2 weeks. Like there was a lot of couldn't do it.
That's true.
So anyway, in that time, I've played a lot of different stuff. So I'm going to try to keep it down to a few things.
Yeah, just talk to us about a couple things.
I just started replaying Far Cry 5, not replaying from the beginning. Not like the current run I'm on is the second run I've ever done.
Okay.
I've yet to have ever finished it.
Okay.
I actually bought Far Cry 5 and New Dawn together in like a pack when New Dawn came out for pretty cheap, and was like,
all right, you've been spoiled at the ending of Far Cry 5 already.
Yeah. Well, actually, I sort of wouldn't have been if you hadn't explained to me that that's what happens at the end of Far Cry 5 to get to New Dawn. But admittedly, okay.
Well, we'll talk about spoilers at the end of this THABTO.
But so I've been playing that. I just picked that up again like the other day because I was like, I want to play that. I want to finish that. So I've been doing that. I've been playing a lot of Warframe lately. I've never gotten particularly far in it. I think it's super weird thematically. I can't quite wrap my head around what the heck's going on in its story, and it's not doing a great job of trying to make me understand.
I think literally the only thing I know about Warframe is that ninjas play free.
Ninjas play free, yes.
So they were effective with that, but it's all I know.
But I've been they had their conference recently, TennoCon,
Sure.
and they were showing off the sort of new big thing, which is this kind of like area where you can fly a spaceship, and 4 players can like fly the spaceship together, and like a person can like leave your spaceship and then go board another spaceship, and like the discussion I was reading was from a technological standpoint of how the hell are you doing that?
Sure.
And then the second was just like, oh, that looks really neat. And so I got back into that for a bit. So I've played that a bit lately, trying to wrap my head around its systems more. I'd say that the hardest thing for Warframe is actually probably how little it teaches you about how to deal with it in terms of it. It's a big grindy crafter game.
Okay.
Primarily, you're kind of trying to get materials for different weapons and different what do they call them? Warframes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Those are the different character classes, but there's like a whole, okay, you need to get the blueprint for the Warframe, and then the blueprint for the parts that make up the Warframe, and then the materials to make the parts that go into the Warframe. And if there's a like logic to it or some where you can look that's like, where the hell do I get this blueprint? I haven't found it. I'm sure the internet knows, but I don't like to use that. I don't like to do that. I don't like to go outside the game to find these things. Mm-hmm. And I know that that's not some of the games kind of expect that you do.
Yeah, and I know you don't like that. You don't like it when they think that, hey, the internet exists, so you'll all figure out how to do this.
Yeah, you'll figure out how to do this, and then there'll be a guide, and you can just go look at the guide. It's like, no, that's not what I want to do. I want to stay in here and be able to understand what I'm supposed to be doing.
Right.
And yeah, it's not great about that, to be perfectly honest.
Well, I can only tell you I'm a narrative guy. You know that. Half my postmortems are about the storylines and various things. The brick wall that I hit, I have downloaded Warframe. I have put it on. It is so strange right from the get-go that very often I just hit that brick wall and say, I'm going to bounce to something I understand better. And every time you describe something like, oh, you're in a spaceship with 4 other people and you're traveling the solar system and landing in various places, it sounds awesome. It actually reminds me of how I feel when I read some of those stories in Kotaku or wherever about EVE Online.
I knew that's where you were going to go.
You did. Well, and all the betrayals and economic contingency plans and things like that, where it's like, that sounds fantastic, but if I ever turn that on, it's just a spreadsheet and I don't know where the fun is. So I've had that problem myself with Warframe, but I know a ton of people that really, really like it. So I'm glad you're giving it a shot.
Yeah, I've been trying to. I'm playing it from both a personal and professional direction because, like, I want to understand it. I'm not into a lot of free to play games. Warframe, in particular, has sort of more of a free to play model that I want to understand better. It's largely player versus environment content. Most of what you get actually impacts gameplay. It's not just cosmetics. And so I want to kind of understand. Okay, how do you build that in a way that the community generally seems to appreciate and accept,
right?
Whereas like I feel like a free to play multiplayer game is kind of the easy road, in terms of you don't have to generate as much content, at least not in terms of like AI doing stuff and mission design and all that.
Of course, yeah.
Your monetization is almost purely cosmetic to maintain competitive balance and stuff like that. It's just that one I understand particularly well. And this one, I'm like, all right, I think there's, free to play is becoming more and more prevalent. This generation really likes it. It's what they're used to. But I haven't seen it applied particularly well to anything outside of kind of competitive multiplayer.
Sure. Fortnite and Apex work great, but you take it to PvE and it's a harder sell.
Right. And how do you do that? And certainly Warframe still has a lot of multiplayer components, and that's, I'm sure, crucial to its success. And how do you do this? Also, every time I read about Warframe, I hear, oh, that sounds cool. They made these open areas. I want to go check that out. And then usually I burn out after a little while when I'm like, it's very grindy. Like Warframe is just like super grindy. You want that sword, you need like 10,000 of these things and 5,000 of these things and 3,000 of these things.
Or $2, I'm sure. But I mean, you kind of, you say, all right, you got to get paid somehow. You got to feed the family somehow. I understand.
Yeah, it's funny. I generally, in terms of free to play, for me, the only thing I'll ever spend money on is something that I cannot otherwise acquire. If I can grind it, I'm not going to buy it, no matter what the ratio of time to money is, for the most part.
Right. Well, we've talked about that. I had a number of mobile games that I was enjoying. I really liked Galaxy of Heroes and things like that. And I always am inclined to throw a few bucks to the developer when I'm liking something that they did and they're not otherwise charging for it. And I almost always want there to be a tip jar or something that really does absolutely nothing. Because as you say, for whatever reason, whenever I spend that money and I get something ahead of time that I didn't grind for, I didn't quote unquote earn it, whatever my brain thinks of these things, I immediately don't want to play the game or don't want to use the thing. And that's just how I'm wired. And I know definitely that's not how a lot of people are wired, because otherwise this economics model wouldn't work at all. But I always feel that way. So developers, put a $5 just because you like us button and I will pay it.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't know what to do with that, because it's like, I mean, like in a game like Warframe, literally the collection is the goal. There's not, I mean, there's like a weird story you can follow, and there's certainly unlocking all the nodes and stuff. But I think generally it's, I want to get the new thing or a better thing, and I'm going to go get it. If you pay for it, like there's no game left. Like you have the thing, and maybe there's another thing you could potentially go for, but I don't, it's like you lose the pursuit.
Right.
Which is why it's, it's interesting. Warframe and Destiny share some very similar blood, obviously, in terms of what they are, what they're doing. And obviously they have huge differences as well. But it's just fascinating to look at them from like Destiny being a largely premium product and Warframe being free to play. What does that mean for these games that are largely both about pursuing equipment, loot?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you balance that?
Yeah, and I think it's to their credit that they've been able to make that work. I mean, it was essentially I think it was the time frame of a PlayStation 4 type launch title, give or take, maybe a little bit before that.
I believe so. I remember very early on the PlayStation 4's life cycle seeing Warframe like back when it was sort of funny, because it was the first time I think we saw like a decent number of free to play titles on a console.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there was that shooter that wasn't very good, Black Site,
and DC Universe was on there early on.
Go ahead.
Oh, all I was going to say on that was that it absolutely was kind of new. That was one of the new feelings, just like when you plugged in your Xbox 360 and you saw Xbox Live Arcade and how that functioned in that environment. And that's really one of the memories I have about Xbox Live and Xbox. In the PlayStation 4, when it started out, you're absolutely right. There was, you could play all these things for free and play them forever, and you might not ever have to buy a game ever again if you didn't want to. And certainly that has borne itself out for a whole kind of chunk of the video gaming audience that just plays Fortnite or Warframe or Fortnite and Warframe and Apex. And that you really can, if you just feel like playing a game and not spending money, as long as you don't care too much about progression in Warframe or cosmetics in Apex or what have you, you can have a nice night playing things that you didn't pay for.
Yeah, it's the interesting thing, and I wonder. It's so funny. Sorry, I keep saying it's funny or it's so funny. It's just like a thing that I say instead of I think.
I'm sure our viewers or listeners will comment on your language idiosyncrasies to a great extent. Don't worry about it, Tom.
I'm sure at this point in the podcast they have already made comments.
They've already turned it off. Don't worry about it.
Oh,
Nobody's
okay.
listening.
I've already shut them down.
Yeah, it's no problem.
Free to play, like I said, free to play seems like it in a sort of multiplayer, either competitive or player versus environment with cosmetics and things like that. Like it basically, and where there's like, I think the structure of it is the game has to be super grindy, because you have to be able to generate lots of content really cheaply. So it's like, we made this one mission that you have to do 10,000 times if you want to get this new sword, give or take. So that'll, occupy you for a little while we figure out the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
I I wonder, and maybe it's not possible. Maybe it's not something that ever happens. If someone can figure out how to free to play, largely single player content, narrative content, stuff that, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the subscription model ends up being what it is. Like, you want to play the game, it's such and such $1 a month, and we're constantly releasing episodes and stuff, and it's like an HBO subscription or whatever.
Oh.
Or I don't know what it is, but I feel like I'm interested to see what happens there, because I think there's room there. And the thing I was going to say before I was mocking my own language was I'd be really curious. I don't think anyone has all the statistics necessary to look at this to understand, like, what is the value of, single player narrative content, single player heavy system stuff versus, I think we see very clearly how well, received and important multiplayer competitive stuff is. That's on page 1 of the news, but It seems like I'd say the majority of games being made still don't fit that mold. So there must be something there, or is that just us clinging to something that's not really the thing anymore? I don't know.
I don't think they know, in all honesty. And I think there is an element of clinging to it insofar as before the internet, you had a certain kind of game that you could make, and it was The Legend of Zelda if it was really successful, and it was, Ikari Warriors if it wasn't. And in between, you had those types of game experiences, and you add the internet to it, and you're only now kind of seeing the full power of that. I have long, and I think you know this, I've long looked at like JRPGs or even CRPGs and said, why is that not 3 games? Like, I don't understand how your budget works. When you're talking about something like Witcher 3, why is that game 100 hours instead of 5 games of 20 hours when you would feel like you got that value out of it? And I think that when you're talking about single-player content, you probably are going to see more of that division, more bifurcation even into a couple parts, something like the Final Fantasy VII project, because they do take that many more resources that if these publishers, if these companies can convince us that they're actually going to hold to finishing these things, because that's the big risk right now, then that's something that you can get behind. I am all for a Final Fantasy VII that's 200 hours long and is awesome if they actually deliver that. I'm a little bit more worried that if it doesn't sell great in part 2, that part 3 suddenly becomes the Xenosaga guy, rocking back and forth in a rocking chair saying, and that's how the game ended, and I could barely remember it. It was so awesome. The end. And that's, I think, what is a constant worry when you start talking about dividing those kind of pieces of content.
Certainly. Yeah, I think that's entirely valid. And it's a hard position for the company to be in if you're like, look, we're going to make this over 5 chunks, and it's going to take, if each of those is 2 years, that's 10 years. And chunk 2 doesn't do well. They're like,
yeah, exactly.
do we stay the course here? Like, that was the plan. But, how much good money after bad are we potentially putting here?
Yeah, budgets have to be slashed. And that's one of the reasons why the Final Fantasy VII project to me is very interesting, which is it's like, well, it's the perfect storm for seeing one work because it is such an important piece of intellectual property for Square Enix. And you can really feel them throwing their weight behind it. Obviously, I think part 1 is going to sell like gangbusters. It depends on a whole host of things. When does part 2 come out? Is it pretty close? Is it not close at all? That's going to be part of the story there. And I think when you talk about subscriptions potentially cracking that nut, Game Pass is an interesting thing to look at too. They got Obsidian now. They've got Double Fine. They've got other kind of narrative-based companies. Is Game Pass the type of thing that gets you across the finish line for this stuff, where you have smaller, you can essentially sell Act 1 because you're not really selling it. People are just getting to play it because they're subscribers to the service. And then when Act 2 comes out, everybody loves it. And that Game Pass is getting this content. Game Pass is showing its value. And you are getting a 5-act thing that maybe would have had to been crunched down because they are delivering content in a kind of Netflixy way to that service.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm interested. Like, Netflix for games is certainly it's something, I think people talk about. And they're like, how do you do this? How would we do this? Like, it's certainly, you've seen all this streaming over sort of standard television now at this point really become the model. And so I think video games, movies movies are already on Netflix, but like, I don't know what that is, where it's like literally you have a super high premium one that's like you can see things that are in theaters like right now.
Yeah.
Whatever that is. But I think streaming content becoming more and more prevalent, what does that mean for games?
Are you familiar at all with what the Until Dawn folks are doing with their, I think it's called Dark Pictures series, that their plan is right now?
Nope.
So they've got a game coming out either in August or September. I can't quite remember. It's called Man of Medan, I think.
Oh yeah, I've seen the ad on.
So Until Dawn was a horror game. It was actually pretty long. It was like 20 hours long. You have some narrative choices, but you're otherwise controlling these characters. This new game is that, but it's shorter. It's supposed to be something like 4 or 5 hours. And their plan, they say that they're already through like pre-production on 3. Their plan is to release 8 of these things that are that length, one every 6 months or so. And I think it is exactly that kind of thing where you say, okay, what happens when the one fails, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that's a very interesting approach to take, and I think it could work for them, especially like Final Fantasy VII and Square, where you've got some kind of pedigree. A lot of people really liked Until Dawn. I really liked Until Dawn, so they're willing to take that bite of the apple. And then the other kind of thesis for what they're doing is that this isn't a Telltale game. This isn't something that connects. This is going to have one host, like a Rod Serling type, but each game is going to have a completely different take on, I think they're all horror, but like one's going to be on this ghost ship. That's the one that's coming out. One's going to be a Curse of a Pharaoh, Egyptian mummy type thing. And everything else, every other game is going to have a different theme. I think that could really be something that works. And I think you see a lot of these companies trying different stuff of that ilk.
It's like an anthology series.
Exactly. It's exactly like an anthology series in what we might consider TV, or to some extent, JJ and Bad Robot are trying to do that by affixing the word Cloverfield to every random sci-fi movie that's come out of Hollywood. I think to a little bit less success. I don't think you can actually build your anthology in reverse like that. I don't think you can just take, hey, that looks kind of like a Cloverfield thing. Can we strap a CG monster to the end of that? Because I really like 10 Cloverfield Lane, but it's so evident, like when the movie transitions from what was like an indie film to, oh, hey, here are the JJ scenes. And I know he didn't direct it, but it's like that's how it feels. And it's fine. But yeah, I think anthologies are an interesting way to go, and I'm wishing them the best of luck because I do like Until Dawn, and I'm interested to see how Man of Medan, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, actually turns out. I'm looking forward to that one.
Okay. I didn't know it was those guys.
Yeah, it is. So
one of the things I was going to say when you were talking about, why is Witcher not like 10 games or whatever?
Right.
You said like the problem is, we've been in this hours you can get out of the game arms race for so long.
Yep.
I'd say like a decade at least, that like I don't know how you move this now, where like all of the companies have to say together, like, this has gone insane. We're going to release 20-hour products. And if something is longer than that, we're going to split it up. And then
what's so amazing to me, I mean, I love Witcher, but it's like you go back and you look at the games that I love, and yeah, some of them are long, but like, what do we really love? We really love Chrono Trigger, right? That game is 12 hours long.
Yep.
You can make something that is all killer, no filler, and you can do it if you really are aimed at it. And my working thesis on this, by the way, Tom, is that like for Witcher 3 and Assassin's Creed Odyssey, 2 games that I absolutely adore, the way they're built has so many people and so much outsourcing and so many different companies, and that they only really come together in the last year or 6 months, that it's that point where you kind of realize that you accidentally built a 100-hour game. Essentially, that you didn't, that it's like you had everybody working on different islands in Assassin's Creed Odyssey or different acts in Witcher. I mean, it's clearly kind of divided into, you can kind of see where the teams likely were. If you're really thinking about it, that you take all those and you say, oh, well, we thought you were building a 6-hour plot line. You built a 20-hour plot line. We put them all together, and I mean, it's good for these guys that they get this content, but we can't really easily separate it. So I think it's part of a symptom of this kind of this large breadth and spread of, we've got 1,000 people working on this thing.
Well, and then you got another problem there, right? Like if you look at Assassin's Creed, clearly I'm playing it. I love it. I think it's fantastic.
It is. Hoeglaw's like, 2018 #1 game of the year.
You want to just go into ancient Greece and just like hang out there?
Yep.
That's a thing. And that's fantastic. And I love what they did. Assassin's Creed Origins, I think took some flack from people saying it's not an Assassin's Creed, which I understand. And I totally dig the way that they took the formula. But I can understand people that are like, well, this isn't, what I've been playing previously. And we get into a weird thing here where it's like the value of IP versus what the IP actually is.
Oh, that's right. I could do a whole episode on Down with Resident Evil 4. Stay tuned for that one.
It's just sort of like, we want the value from the name, and we don't think people are going to care that much that it's not the same game. And maybe Assassin's Creed, proves that. But what I was going to say is, if you look at a game like, okay, now I actually did lose my point. We were talking about Odyssey.
We were talking about hundreds of hour games, and I was talking about it being made by 1,000 people, and that's how that happened. And then you said, well, that brings up a good point, and then you completely lost everybody that was listening.
Yeah. No, I was saying, like, so Odyssey, you look at that, and it's like, this is going to take 300, 400 hours or whatever. And they do a good job of, I think, and maybe this is by virtue of how it's built. Personally, I think it was intentional, where each of the places has like little stories that you can do inside of a small thing. So you can play it episodically if that's your desire, or you can play it hardcore if you are in college or otherwise have no responsibility.
Those were the days, weren't they, Tom?
Oh God, I played so many games. It's just. Oh, so what I was going to say is interesting. That's what it is. Okay, so 300, 400 hours, right, of Assassin's Creed Odyssey, but of single-player content, largely single-player content. And then you look at these people that play Fortnite for like 8,000 hours or something, and I think the Ubisofts of the world, or anyone making the single-player content, is like, if that's the value, if the pure value is, and I don't think that it is, but it's an easy number to look at, is how many hours you've played it. Those are theoretically hours of joy or in entertainment or whatever. How can we compete with this thing that's evergreen and effectively doesn't have an end? No matter what we do, like we can't. There's no content machine that we've yet built. We don't have like an AI inside the game that's just constantly generating new content. So it's like we have to get that number super high to even be competitive. And certainly, and you see this all over, and I think that is it. The problem is we focused on time over anything else. And so if you've got two games, one that's 50 hours and one that's 100 hours, that seems sort of similar, even if the 50-hour game is better, the 100-hour game is likely to get more praise if it is even in the same ballpark.
Well, undoubtedly true. And I think that some of that comes from the market is often kids. And, if you can buy one game for your quarter, if it's 200 hours long, you feel pretty good about that versus, I love Metal Gear Solid, but the truth is that's an 8-hour game. And I love it. I wouldn't change a thing about it. But if you're just looking for, I need to take up time, I need to entertain myself, it's not the best bang for your buck.
No, that's true. We talk about as you mature, as a gamer or a person or whatever, like you shift over from having, lots of time and not lots of money to having, money, decent amount of money usually, and not lots of time. And and so as older people, our interests are different. It's like, I want something that's going to entertain me and tell me a really good story inside of like the 10 to 20 hour mark, because that's what I could probably commit to a game.
Well, I think I was joking with you before that said, there's a lot of discussion about reviewers, whether they're finishing games, whether you finished Fire Emblem, if you did only one of the campaigns, that kind of thing. Honestly, I need a site that just gives me the reviews of, so you've played a dozen hours of this game. How did I feel about a dozen hours? Because honestly, that's mostly what I'm going to get out of 9 out of 10 of the games that I buy. Yeah, did this entertainment me for 12 hours? If it did, great.
I find that so unsatisfying, and we've only steered further into that. When I was in school for game development, I think the statistic was like 70% of the people won't finish it. And I think it's only gone up from there since we've made them, enormous.
Well, that's why when you look at those trophy data, it really is. I think God of War from last year has something like 55% have gotten the ending trophy. And that's like just a ridiculously high percentage for video games right now.
Mm-hmm.
So that says a lot about that game. I liked it just fine, but I didn't. A lot of people are saying it's one of the games of the generation, etc. But you do look at those percentages, and I gotta believe if you're a developer and you see 7% have your ending trophy or something, it just makes you a little sad.
Yeah, I didn't finish God of War. I attempted it twice. Once I just got distracted with other stuff. This most recent time I was playing it a lot, and then I guess I probably got distracted again, but also like it was just sort of a certain amount of repetition. It's like,
Yeah,
okay, I get it. Like, it's cool.
I mean, when I'm being mean and glib on Twitter, I call it a 30-hour jaunt across a lake, acting as a prelude for a real story that's going to happen in the next one.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fine. It's a good game. It undoubtedly is. But it's got certain narrative beats to it, and it certainly has a lot of go get this MacGuffin, no, not that MacGuffin, this MacGuffin, no, not that MacGuffin, this one over here as its primary plot driver. That makes me go, you're just elongating it for the sake of it. And I wonder if that's not part of this conversation that we're having, which is that you have to hit some kind of bullet on the back of your box to get people to have their foot in the door for a single player only, no life services, no anything kind of component to it.
No, it's true. And I mean, I think most gamers would say, at least that were around kind of when it was released, would say God of War, the original, was one of the probably the best games of all time. It was just like a complete departure from what had existed. It was really cool. It had all this spectacle and scale that were just not done. But the game itself is probably like 10 hours.
It's very short. Yeah, no, it's very short. I think it's under 10 probably.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what I really loved about God of War 1, the original, was that when you beat it, they had all those behind the scenes stuff. It was like a DVD package. I really loved those.
Oh, right.
But I'm an unusual cat, you know.
And they had some weird, like, different directions we might take the storyline. Like, here's a Titan dead in the desert of Nevada or something.
Right, but with like army base around it, like it's going to be modern. Yeah, no, I remember those because one of them was, and Zeus is the son of Kratos is the son of Zeus, which of course is one of the jumping off points for God of War 2. I really liked that. I thought those were interesting. Sometimes I look at those videos on YouTube, and I wish we did more of that. And I'm using we to mean you primarily.
Yeah, in the industry. I make these calls.
Yes, I know you do. I look, man, I know you get done with THABTO and you make a ton of design decisions just based off of your thoughts and what your brother said. It's one of those things where I really think as the industry, as the video game just kind of process continues to mature, I think there will be more interest in how the sausage is made and those kinds of things. I have always loved commentary tracks on my movies and those kinds of dives into the process. And I love finding out about video games because, you know, as a lawyer, as a guy that's in a kind of analog field that deals with words and contracts and things like that, to some extent, even though I interact with them all the time and I'm constantly negotiating these things, the actual video game process is a bit of magic. It's, ones and zeros turning into Kratos or whoever on your screen is pretty magical.
Yeah, it's funny. As someone who works on it, I still like at the end of the day, kind of when things are done and you get a chance to, experience them. I'm like, wow, like that's like when you're in it versus when it's done. It just feels like it's so different. There is some magic that happens in there. I love to hear that. I actually had a concept at one point. I don't know how I would do this or how I would fund it. But it was basically, I wanted to do like a community driven game. And you're seeing this some in terms of like early access and games together, things like that, where they're really open about the development and the community's playing the game in kind of like a very early state and able to comment on what they like and what they don't and which direction it should go. And I wanted to take that one step kind of further and just basically like put out like the like most basic, I don't know, let's pick something that'll be easy for people to grok. It's the most basic first person shooter. Figure out some skeleton to put that on. So it's a roguelike first person shooter with like a ziggurat or something where you're going through dungeons and okay, we've got that. All it has out of the box is like some guns, some dungeon building. Cool. And then you put up for debate among the community and maybe they decide the features to be debated, or maybe you as the developer put out, all right, here's some directions I think we could go, debate the merits of this and tell me what you think we should do. And so the community would actually be guiding the development of the game. One, I think this would be interesting purely from a psychological studies standpoint, because I think there's every chance that you might get the Homer car. Where, you have all
good reference, solid reference
for us anyway. The young kids are like, what? That you could get a bunch of like, it'd be cool if it did this, and it'd be cool if it did this, and it'd be cool if it did this. And you put all those together, and it's, you know, a bunch of great tastes that don't taste really good together. Or you could like get something that has a strong community that feels a lot of ownership in it, and that becomes kind of a living product in terms of the, you know, free to play or sustainability. Like, let's say you just said, all right, you know, I'm going to work on expansions. Every expansion is going to be like, I don't know what you do with this, because expansions have proven to cause problems because your audience gets bifurcated and whatever. I think that if this was purely a kind of like a single player, so the community existed to talk about the game but wasn't playing the game together, then you could have expansions that add all sorts of stuff, and you could buy whatever you want. Like, I don't want spells, I don't care about that. I want orcs, whatever. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. I don't know exactly, but I think that there's, you know, a lot of ownership that could go into that, and people getting to have like just a taste of this game development, which they think is probably think it's much sexier than it is. And I don't know, it's just sort of like a side project concept I have in my head that I wouldn't do for money, because I don't think that it would potentially be, it could be profitable if you hit it right, but I don't know. But just to see, like, you know, what does this look, what does truly open development look like?
Right. Are you familiar with the Endless Legend team? I can't remember what their company was named.
Yeah,
that actually reminds me of some of what they did.
So I think that's what Games Together is. Games Together is the platform that they use. I don't think that's theirs. I could be wrong. Right. I could be wrong. But basically, where they could literally put features, it'd be on like a pegboard, and people could like push them up and down, and
yeah, they had like space bucks that you got earned from like being a participant in the community, and you would like use your space bucks for more votes on like what direction the development would take. I always thought that was fascinating.
Me too. And that's part of where this kind of comes from, is like trying to figure out how to do that in a way that's effective. Because I really do think, I mean, it's hard. I think there's a mix of these two, I don't know what you want to call them, like primal forces, where it's like, I do think that sometimes people don't know exactly what they want, because people don't know what they haven't seen. Sure. You can't like something you don't know. So a community-driven thing is going to struggle with innovation unless you really, really push that. Like, nope, I need new ideas. Like, community support this with new ideas, and then where does that go?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think you've heard me say in this space, if not on phone calls with you in general, one of the reasons that I pay the $60 is to have a professional developer develop for me, because it's just not my wheelhouse. So, you know, you figuring out where the fun is part of what I'm paying you for. Mm-hmm. It's one of the reasons I hate it when you ask me to select the difficulty and hit 600 different knobs without my ever having played the game first, because I always feel like I'm doing it wrong. And so I think that's a fascinating thing. I think it would be interesting. It would be something that is interesting for people that are not me.
Oh, the participating in the development?
Yeah. I want other people to come up with it. It's just like, you know, it's Mario Maker. I like my little levels, but I'm really wowed by the stuff that other people make, because that's just what they do. You know, I have creativity in what I do, but not so much in those kinds of things. And I love seeing what really good developers, not just people that work at Nintendo, but even people in like the Mario Maker space, can come up with. But I'm not good at it in and of itself. Is there anything else you wanted to add on this or any other score? Because I think we're going to skip the last game and kind of talk about a few of the cultural type of items, because otherwise we're running a little long, because we haven't done a THABTO in a long time, and I know people don't necessarily want a 3-hour version of this podcast and video series.
Or want some sort of like framework of actual topics as opposed to just chatting for 2 hours.
I don't know that it's just chatting. I actually think you sell yourself short on these kinds of things. I personally find it really interesting. I think one of the things that happens when you are an expert in an area is that it does sound so kind of easy to you, or not that necessarily novel or exciting. Everything that you've said on this so far, I've been really interested in your thought processes on. And I think hopefully that comes across to the people that watch and listen to this. But I certainly understand thinking, yeah, we're just kibitzing about video games. But I think you're doing a great job.
No, yeah, I'd be honestly curious. So if anyone wants to leave a comment to that effect, Yeah, I mean, I spend most of my time with developers.
Exactly.
I work a lot of long hours and work with obviously other developers, and so I don't think I have as good a view of what a video game looks like to a consumer anymore.
And that's why two Hoegs are in fact better than one, because I don't exactly know what you do every day either. So that's what makes these conversations fun. So do you have anything more on the kind of what you plan, document design type items?
Let's see. I said Warframe, Far Cry, Assassin's Creed Odyssey. No, I think that's pretty much good.
All right, fantastic. Well, I think we're going to put a pin and table that Dragon Quest II Builders that we talked about. And then I was also going to talk a little bit about Judgment, which is essentially the spin-off game from the Yakuza series in which, of course, you play a disgraced lawyer. So we're typecasting for me. I know a little bit of Kung Fu, not as much as the gentleman in Judgment, but I have been enjoying that game a lot.
But Rick,
I have always...
Rick is very experienced as a disgraced lawyer.
Oh, no. I'm going to have to get like one of those, like a shock jock radio that has a button for like sound files. I'm just going to have to get one that says shots fired, and I'm just going to have the button at the ready.
God, I hope you don't ever do that.
Yeah. Oh, it'll have like a chicken noise, and yeah, we'll just have the whole thing. We'll sell ourselves to New York shock jock radio. I really enjoy that. I've always enjoyed playing a quirky Japanese lawyer, as has been the case for the entirety of the Ace Attorney series, which I'm now playing with my family, which is absolutely fantastic for learning reading and talking to kids about mysteries and clues and evidence to a certain extent. It's not as great when you're talking about multiple murders and the concepts of suicide and blood and how it leads to evidence and things like that. But we're working through it. And I'll talk more about both those when we come back to games, because I have a lot further to go in Judgment. If you like Yakuza, absolutely it is that. Only with a slightly different framework because, again, you are a disgraced lawyer. And when you become a disgraced lawyer, you obviously become a street detective that kicks the heck out of thugs as you pass them on the street. That's what I've been told.
Because why wouldn't you?
Yeah, of course. And it's a lot of fun. And so I do recommend checking that out. Outside of video games, still in the video game industry, one of the big topics that popped up in the last couple weeks was the fact that Nintendo actually got a class action served against it because of what they're calling Joy-Con drift, which, as I understand it, is the notion that after a while, if you leave your Joy-Con just sitting there, it will do things on its own. Primarily, I think it will push up. I think that's what I was seeing a lot of, although I was also seeing some video of it kind of sliding across the menu without any other inputs. And this class action was premised on the fact that Nintendo knew of this quote-unquote defect and didn't do anything about it. The problem with the case, and I have this in Virtual Legality, I covered it for about an hour. Do check out the video where we go over the claim line by line. The problem with the case overall is that for the most part, Nintendo was replacing things when the warranty window was open and not replacing them when the warranty window was closed. And it was kind of the usual for a piece of consumer electronics that maybe isn't the best, but has been made at a consumer grade so as to get out the door at $40 instead of $400 and that kind of thing. But one thing that they wound up doing was that in this last week, after the class action was filed, they wound up saying, pretty clandestinely, although it was ultimately reported on, that anybody that asked for a fix to their Joy-Cons would get it outside the warranty window if they wanted one, and for free. And that reminded me a lot of what Microsoft ultimately wound up doing in the 360 era for the Red Ring, which was, nope, we don't care. They called it an extension of warranties, but I think I returned my Red Ring of Death Xbox 4 times. And so what I wanted to ask you about, first of all, Tom, is how's your Switch? Any problems with any of your Joy-Cons?
I don't know if you knew this before we started talking about this, but yeah, actually, one of mine drifts down.
No, I had no idea.
Yeah, so I actually we have a bunch of Joy-Cons now, so I just swapped it out, and it's currently sitting there. I guess I'll have to see if I can send it in and what that'll cost.
You can, and it will be free.
But the other thing I've actually had issues with is that the Joy-Cons are not particularly well secured, so they'll come out even without you pressing the little button on the back.
Okay, yeah. I know I can do that if I give it a particularly good kind of flick of the wrist and I'm trying to fire the Joy-Con out. I can get them to come out a little bit.
No, mine is just like if you push on it on the bottom with your thumb, like a little, just slides out.
Now, I know you have boys and I have girls, and maybe that's not the difference at all, but how violently are they playing with your Switch,
Well, that's
Tom?
the thing. I have my own Switch. That's not,
so they haven't done anything to
they
this
might
one.
have done some of this at some point. You know, I'm not watching my Switch 24 hours a day, but
Sure. Got a ring
I would
camera at the same
assume for
time.
the most part that they haven't, because their save games aren't on my Switch, and
Yeah.
they're generally just not using my Switch.
And you're a pretty cautious guy, so this one just happened to have, obviously it's got that repetitive mechanical motion, right? You're putting Joy-Cons in and out, and so anything that could get ground down would get ground down.
Yeah, and admittedly, I play my Switch mobile a lot. Like I joked about this with you, I think yesterday or whatever. Is like I forget sometimes that you can put it on a TV.
Versus me, who has docks in every room, so I can just take the Switch to different TVs.
I'll be playing it in bed or on the chair while my kids are watching something or whatever. I'm very rarely using it on the television, so I don't know if just like the control, holding the controllers to hold the console up once you get to like a while there, like 40 hours or more, like that, the gravity just kind of like makes those hinges not as strong.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, I defended Nintendo a little bit in that video that I did, which is just that the claim was pretty weak. I don't think anybody is questioning that the Switch is super high-end, this should never break kind of equipment. It always kind of felt a little loosey-goosey. You hold your Joy-Con in your hand, it's like, yeah, this is pretty kind of low-end controller support. That's the absolute opposite from the Nintendo Switch Pro controller, by the way. I love that thing to death. But yeah, I can totally understand why that would happen and why it would bother you. I don't think you got free fixes for that particular problem just yet. But I think one of the problems that Nintendo had on this is that they made a system that actually gets a lot of use. They never had this issue with the Wii U. You released a game on the Wii U and it would have, 6,000 sales, and that would be a win for that system. Well, and now,
yeah,
everybody's playing it.
I think the Wii U we just put in a corner. That's not that important to the conversation. I think what ends up being more similar is the Wii, which had also, I would say, kind of like not great remotes that were being bashed about and stuff like that. But the price point for a remote, I think, was like $30, maybe $20. Okay. And a pair of Joy-Cons is $70. I don't think you can buy a single Joy-Con. So
I think you can from Nintendo.
Oh, maybe you can order it directly. Because I was going to say, because if your right one is busted, you don't need a new left one. I mean, I've had controllers, kind of wear down over time. I bought plenty of third-party Microsoft controllers. I guess those were the ones that were either getting the most use or the most break or whatever. I highly don't recommend that because the third-party stuff is garbage.
Yes, our third-party prospective sponsors or friends of listening to the show. What he means is some are not good, but yours, person that's listening to this, yours is good.
Rick's probably right. I don't get paid for this, so. No, it's just like I would get things, and it's just like, I guess something about a controller is so specific in terms of how you're putting, like, exactly how much pressure you need to put on the thumbstick to do X, Y, or Z. And if that's even off a little bit, like you can't use it. In my opinion, like maybe there's some people who are like, that doesn't bother. They're not. And maybe that's perfectly fine for most normal users.
It's one of those where it's like I've had gummy shoulder buttons on a lot of my PlayStation controllers that I kind of just lived with.
Yeah, and I've had face buttons, I think particularly on the PS4, sometimes also on the Xbox One, that just kind of like, yeah, if you press A about a million times, it eventually is like, yeah, that spring's a little rough.
Yeah, that's the question that's always very hard when you talk about these things, is you're just talking about it on the internet, and there's two things that you never know, which is like, you could have 200 people have a Reddit post about their problems with Joy-Con drift. If those are the only 200 people on Earth, that is not a worthwhile percentage for consumer electronics failure.
Right.
And it's just very hard to tell. It's also very hard to tell exactly how you're using it. If you play Fortnite every night for 6 hours and you've got 100,000 presses of your joystick or whatever it is, at some point, everything in the world is going to fail. And so I don't know whether you did that or not. If you didn't, obviously it's a problem. And obviously Nintendo's taking it seriously because they've moved to this kind of, if they ask for it, you replace the Joy-Con with no other kind of stipulations, nothing about warranty windows or price or anything like that. I think one of the things that is happening with respect to that particular story is, did you happen to see the announcement of the Nintendo Switch Lite?
Nope.
So Nintendo announced that there's going to be what amounts to, and you can envision this in your head, and you can look it up at the same time if you want to, but a slightly smaller Nintendo Switch without Joy-Cons, essentially built as if the Joy-Cons were on it always. It's just one piece of plastic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things that happens when you talk about Joy-Con drift, you talk about significant issues with the joystick kind of component, is if you're selling a unit now that is all one piece of plastic, if there is a joystick failure, that means sending the whole thing in.
Right.
That means sending your Switch in. And so I think that Nintendo's trying to get out in front of it and say, we can't have this be a story because we're going to be selling Switch Lites in the next couple months. That all kind of being the background, and knowing that you've only heard about this product in the last minute, have you? Is that of any interest to you? It's slightly smaller. It's $250, and it doesn't have any. It doesn't have any TV functionality. It is mobile only.
No, that has no interest to me.
Well, okay. That's good. Very definitive answer. I like that. Have you heard about how to elongate conversations in a podcast or radio show format? It's good. I'll see what I can work with on that. No, in all honesty, I think that's fair. You said you had 2 Switches, right? You have one for your kids already. If you didn't have that second Switch, is that something that would appeal, or do they like playing on the TV?
I still don't think so. They like playing on the TV. Playing on the TV is like a reward. They get very excited when they're like, "Can we play on the big TV?" And we're like, "Yeah, sure." And they're like, "Yeah, best day ever."
And it is the best day ever.
And I just that functionality seems worth the $50 to me. Like, it's I mean, heck, just the equipment that you get with it is probably like, I mean, I guess you'd still get a charger, so you're saving a docking station and an HDMI cable.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that people reacted to with this that they were really excited about that never really came up for me is that they don't like the size of the Switch for travel, that it's just slightly too big to be what they want, fitting in their briefcase or otherwise playing it. In particular, I heard this a lot about potentially people playing it on the subway in Japan. And that might well be the case, that a slightly smaller form is actually more useful. But I looked at it as a product that I didn't need either. And one of the things that had been kind of rumored in the Wall Street Journal and elsewhere this year was that Nintendo was also planning on making what amounts to a Nintendo Switch Pro, which I would be massively in favor of. I like my Switch. I really do. I love a lot of the things I play on it. But I would love it if it just had just that little bit more oomph. It just needs just a little bit more. And I think that would really, really work out for me. But that is not officially announced. If that is coming out, I suspect strongly that they are going to use that as a counter to the imminent Xbox and PlayStation 5 launches at the holidays next year.
Yeah, I wonder how strong a counter that is.
Well, it doesn't need to be that strong. I mean, the Switch is now the 4th fastest selling system in video game history, behind only the Wii, the PlayStation 2, and the PlayStation 4, and it is selling like hotcakes still. And so I think the Switch Lite combined with console-level Pokemon in November, it's their holiday to lose, and they won't. So it's Nintendo's on a bit of a winning streak, and you do have to wonder whether you've got now essentially 3 wildly different business models, because Xbox is essentially going all in with Game Pass and Netflix of games. PlayStation appears to be the standard, what we expect, putting the money behind the single-player premier Oscar bait type experiences and high-end hardware. And then Nintendo, as always, is off in its corner juggling fish or whatever it's doing. With that technique, Nintendo is just so wildly different. You really don't even think about them in the same kind of beat in your head. And they can go Wii and be massively successful, then go Wii U and, crash the car almost immediately after leaving the garage, or they can go Switch, which is pretty wildly successful, but not zeitgeist Wii level successful.
Sure.
So, yeah, I think it'll be interesting to watch. That'll certainly be something that if we do an episode in, December of 2020, that kind of thing, we will be discussing the various ways in which the companies are operating. But I think Microsoft knows better than to fight essentially first-party prestige gaming against Sony at this point. And they did buy a dozen companies in order to do something with them. But I don't know whether they're going to aim all of those companies at prestige games, or I think more likely they are building a environment in which they can churn out content for Game Pass that is of a good level, but maybe not the, oh my God, look at God of War or Spider-Man type level.
Mm-hmm.
Which is all a long way of saying you've got Joy-Con drift. You now are aware that you can get it repaired for free, so you'll be doing that after this episode. You're not interested in a Nintendo Switch Lite. Is there any other piece of hardware that really disappointed you? Did you have any red rings of death with your 360?
I did. I think I had one. I think I remember having to send it in once.
Oh, I was friends with the postal office guy. I mean, it was every couple weeks for me.
I definitely, and I also had I had a bunch of PlayStation 3 problems. To be honest, the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, maybe I don't play them as much, are been rock solid compared to what I remember from previous generations. PlayStation 3, I disassembled several for heat issues and different things like that. I had to I think it was one of my PlayStation 3s had like a piece of cardboard that I had to put in to hold the CD thing in place because it was like rattling. I mean, just like, admittedly, like I said, I play on my computer a lot now. So I don't know if that's just maybe, no, your consoles just aren't seeing, and I work and stuff. So your consoles aren't seeing as much, use, but I mean, my sons play them a lot, and
well, did you upgrade to a pro model on both of those as well? So are we actually looking at a half generation?
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
So I mean, I think,
but I mean, I don't know. I had a PlayStation 3 die, and then I guess PlayStation 3 at the time which was different, when they ripped the backwards compatibility out. So they didn't technically call it a new model, but it was.
Yeah, a new model that is worse, just quantifiably worse. But what can you do? Well, all right. So now we know where your positions are on the Nintendo Switch. Let's talk about one last thing before we button up this episode of THABTO. I recently learned, as in yesterday, that you are very excited about Tuesday's release on digital of Avengers Endgame. Is that an accurate statement?
Totally accurate.
Totally accurate. And why are you so excited about Avengers Endgame coming out digitally?
I have not seen Endgame yet.
You have not seen Endgame yet. And would you say you were interested in seeing Endgame?
I was very interested in seeing it. Actually, we didn't see Infinity War at the theater either.
Wow.
Because just kids and we've had trouble getting babysitters. We've had
Sure.
3, I think 2 or 3 dates to go see Endgame, and all 3 have fallen through.
They all fell through.
Yeah.
And the reason I have this entry point into this conversation is, this is the part that's most remarkable to me. Are you at all spoiled about the events of Avengers Endgame?
I don't believe so.
You don't believe
I
that
don't
you know
really
anything
have
from
much
Endgame?
of a social network presence. This is probably actually the most social networking I do.
I know. And by the way, commenters, he's not going to read your comments.
I'm not, but not before I watch Endgame. Nope.
So don't try it.
No chance.
He knows what you're up to. So don't try it. But that was so wild to me because as a guy that markets Hoeg Law and is on Twitter and is on Facebook and has the website and gets emails from all corners of the earth, I do not think that I could have remained unspoiled on Endgame past maybe the next Friday after it released. Maybe.
Yeah, I think the biggest risk I had was some loud people at work. That I would sit next to, and we're almost always talking about whatever the newest media thing was. But that was like the biggest risk, and I think I just managed to avoid that one.
That's hilarious.
Or couldn't.
I was getting popcorn at the actual Endgame showing, and I was behind 2 teenagers who were talking about whether or not the other one had seen the latest leaks of, wherever Endgame had released by that point in time, and was starting to talk about substance, and I held back by like 20 steps in this line, and the person behind me was upset, and I'm like, no, it's not going to end this way. The movie's in a half hour. But what I wanted to ask about this is, so you're not spoiled on Endgame. Phenomenal job. I'm really proud of you. That is amazing. That should be a sitcom episode of some kind. But what that you were excited about or that you were otherwise interested in, what got spoiled for you?
Is this a KOTOR just like softball or?
Well, I thought you might go with that story, but I don't know. I have not memorized every detail of your life. And if you want to make me look bad with various things about KOTOR, you absolutely have that option.
So for anyone not familiar with the abbreviation KOTOR, that is Knights of the Old Republic, or the Star Wars RPG made by BioWare, originally released on the Xbox.
That's right. BioWare used to be an RPG maker. There is a company going by the name BioWare now. We're not quite sure what they do.
Yeah,
but they used to be really, really good.
Anyway,
yeah. So this game existed, and this is outside the spoiler zone. If you want to turn this off because you're thinking about playing this game from roughly 2002, 2003, you go right ahead. But otherwise, we're going to talk about this thing that was spoiled for Tom by his loving older brother.
Yeah. So Knights of the Old Republic came out. It came out originally on the Xbox, and I don't know if it was a timed exclusive or if it was just the way that it shook out. It was coming out later on the PlayStation or on the PC, and that's where I was going to play it. Was on the PC. I didn't want to play it on the Xbox because the frame rate was kind of garbage, and I didn't want to deal with that, and I wanted to have mouse controls. Anyway, so I was waiting. Rick and I, during summers and throughout our youth, played games in the same space. We would have two TVs or somehow set up so that we could both.
Well, you were on your computer. I was on the TV for this particular one.
In this case, we were in my bedroom, if I recall correctly, because Rick, I think, was at college.
I was home for the summer
at this point. And so we were in my bedroom. I was playing on my computer, and Rick was on my couch playing KOTOR. And so I'd say one of the bigger plot twists in RPG history is, and it's almost like it's hard, you have to try to imagine that you don't already know the information I'm about to share because no one did. But basically, the big twist in Knights of the Old Republic is you get kind of a prologue that there were two bad Sith guys and they disappeared, and then only one came back. And it turns out that your character is the other one, except you don't know this until it's revealed to you about halfway through the game. So you are actually this like legendary bad guy who has been kind of like brainwashed or had his memory wiped or whatever.
Jedi stuff, you know.
And so like, you know, what does that mean? So then the rest of the game starts to be like people recognize you as this person, and you know, that you start having interactions that are interesting in that regard. But basically there's a big plot point, and I was sitting playing on my computer and Rick was playing it when it happened, and he had no idea that it was coming. It in honesty, when it happens in the game, it's supposed to be a surprise. That's what it is. So, but it was a cutscene, and I was sitting at the computer and I couldn't not hear it. And by the time Rick realized that I think it was going to reveal something that I didn't want to know, it was revealed. So, yes, I was, and so now anytime basically that Rick spoils something for me, or really I think we spoil something for each other, we call it revening one another, because the name of the character who you ended up being in KOTOR was Darth Revan.
Yeah, I did that. You know, memory is a funny thing, because my recollection of this chain of events is actually you're kind of sitting kitty corner to the TV, and they say that you're Darth Revan, and you do kind of a dramatic slow motion turn in your chair to just give me the daggers and say, did they just say you're Darth Revan? I felt so bad.
I mean, that is yes, if I recall correctly. I don't know if I did a comically slow turn or if just time had slowed down for you, but I did look at you. I did say, did they just say you're Darth Revan? And you, I don't know if you were like covering half your face, or like you're just staring at, like it was deer in the headlights, because you were like, you knew what had happened. There was you couldn't take it back. It's like, well, okay.
Yeah. Well, you know, at some point I'll do a THABTO about little brothers that erased all your progress in Final Fantasy Tactics, and we'll call it a day. But no, I think it's one of those things where it just sticks in your brain, and we've never forgotten that kind of thing. And, you know, I think for me personally, I'm pretty fortunate that these things don't get spoiled for me. I love narratives and I love stories, so I think my wife would tell you that for the most part I spoil things for myself. that I can generally see if you're doing a good job writing your story and you have to leave a few breadcrumbs to make your twist make sense. I can usually catch those as they happen.
Sure.
But I do remember one that I think probably spoiled somebody somewhere that I really recall very prominently as I was driving through my neighborhood coming back from work, and someone just after Half-Blood Prince, the novel, had come out, had written on the stop sign, which is a traffic signal that you have to look at, Snape kills Dumbledore. And I just remember thinking, wow, that's a bummer of a way to find out. And so it's interesting. Obviously, on the internet now, we see an entire kind of troll subculture of you're watching a cooking episode and somebody would put in X, Y, and Z from Endgame just in the random kind of comments while you're watching along, just to be that guy. And I don't love that. I'm not entirely on board with kind of spoiler culture because I'm continually of the belief that essentially the second go-round is the strongest because you can kind of follow along with what the writer wants to do the best. And if an entire story hinges only on the twist, it probably wasn't that good to begin with. And KOTOR certainly gets out of that trap. Even knowing that, I think you went back and played it, and you enjoy that game. You love that game.
I do, though I'm almost certainly wouldn't have played it the way that I did.
Oh, knowing that you're a secret Sith
Knowing
Lord?
that I played the full evil, like as evil as you can be plotline.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, I don't even know that I've ever seen
I
that
ordered
one.
one of the characters to murder their best friend, another one of the characters.
So what you're saying is the brainwashing really didn't take hold for your version.
I torched the entire universe.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's one of those that's really interesting, and I can certainly understand why people are sensitive to it. I think one of the things that I always find funny about how sensitive some people are is this is a common complaint that I've heard from some of the folks at Easy Allies, where I'm a sponsor, is they do reviews of video games, right? And in those reviews, they're videos on YouTube, and they do certain clips of things, and they say certain things about the plotline, and inevitably they get complaints about X, Y, or Z being a spoiler. And Easy Allies is pretty good about basically keeping all the video clips to what we would consider the first act of whatever game we're talking about.
Right.
And talking about things on a very professional basis. But you get people complaining about the fact that, you totally spoiled that Fire Emblem Three Houses has 3 houses. and it's like, and Brandon Jones, who's the voice of Easy Allies, or some of the other folks over there, will say, well, I mean, we don't think it's a spoiler, but at some level, don't watch the video if you don't want like absolutely anything about the game.
Valid. I don't know. I mean, to be honest, and I've done that. Like, there's some games that I straight up don't want to know anything about, like whether it's I want to discover the systems for myself. I want to make my own assessments on different things. Like, really, any opinion that you put in your brain is in there, whether or not you're able to shut it out. You're like, I think, like, if you watch a review and that person says, the combat's a little clunky, your tilt is already that the combat's a little clunky. Doesn't?
Oh, see, I'm anti-authoritarian, so I'm already
okay,
being like, no, it's
your
not.
Tilt is
combat
your
is awesome.
Fine, your tilt is the opposite. It's to prove that reviewer wrong. But regardless, you're tilted. You're not neutral.
I am tilted. It's exactly correct.
And so if I want to make sure that I'm coming into something neutral and really have nothing revealed to me, even stuff that could not be considered a spoiler, like where does the game start? What's the first mission about? Whatever it is, I won't. I just like, I know I want this. I see no benefit in watching this review. So I will look at these people's opinions later.
Yeah. I try to do a scan, which is basically like, does this all look like it's not broken? It has an ending. I try to scan these things because I don't want to know any of the details. One of the things that comes up for me on this is that I am not going to read the substance of virtually anything anyone says about Death Stranding. And if that winds up being disappointing to me, so be it. Hideo Kojima is on his own little island of thought, and I'm going to ride that wave of crazy right to the end.
Fair enough. I'm sure a character will poop themselves or whatever.
Oh, did you see the teaser? So, sorry if this is a spoiler at all, but there's a teaser for one of the new characters in Death Stranding, and it's a guy by the name of, I think it's Heartman, and he lives for 21 minutes and dies for 3 minutes every 24 minutes.
Sure.
And I'm like, Hideo Kojima, never change, buddy. I'm looking forward to this.
Well, it is, I think being able to create in a virtual world does let you do stuff like that. Like, what would this, like, okay, this is not a real thing. This could probably never be a real thing. But what if it were? Like, how would this person be? Like, what would this?
I totally agree.
What would this
I look at video games. I look at video games and say, there is some of lost potential here because we are so bound to, well, what would it be like to fight a war in the Middle East or whatever? It's like, yeah. But what if you woke up one day and were a pink horse? It's like you could do anything you want in video games. And that's one of the things I really like about Hideo Kojima is he doesn't care. He'll do whatever. And the game might be terrible. I don't know. I suspect it won't be. But in terms of reviews, one, I could guarantee there'll be somebody that's trying to make their name for themselves by just saying it is terrible, regardless of whether it is or not. And two, if you're going to say anything about this wacko plot that we really don't fully understand, that's going to be a net negative for me who wants to experience the full weirdness on its own. It's the same thing that's coming up with, Remedy's new game comes out at the end of August. I'm not going to read a review of a Remedy game. I know what Remedy makes. I know that if we're thinking of these developers like bands, I know what their tunes sound like. I'm in. I don't need anybody to tell me whether or not it's any good. I will like it, and I could only lose something if you tell me any bit of the plot of the weird game about the flying girl in the Department of Control.
Yeah, admittedly, I kind of wish that game studios were more like bands. Because I do think they have flavors, but they can change so much if the internal structure of them actually alters. So the same name can be completely different people with completely different mindsets. It's almost like, and then there's no way to enforce this. There's no way that you'd actually make them, but it's like, if more than half your people leave, you have to change your name. Or if like two of your major creative directors leave, like, you got to change your name.
One of the things I wound up saying in my Lion King postmortem is that one of the reasons I like this new live action version is it does seem like a cover of an old track, and you say, well, it's still Walt Disney, but 2019 Walt Disney is so different from 1994 Walt Disney. They're essentially two entities, and this one's now covering that older entity's work. So I do think that when you have those major institutions and they change completely, then you do have those kinds of differences.
Yeah, and it depends. Like, I think largely you see studios develop a culture and sort of a way of doing things and a way that they feel things, the stuff they want. Like, no one can do everything to the maximum. Like, you have to decide if your studio is really focused on graphics or really focused on systems that overlap or really focused on wacky ass weapon designs and things like that. And it doesn't mean you don't have to do the other stuff, but it's like you can only pick so many things that you're going to dial up to 11.
Right, exactly. And that, you say wacky ass weapon designs, I believe. That was Insomniac's calling card for a big long time. That's what the combination of Resistance and Ratchet and Clank lead you to. And you can see some of that DNA, even though it's wildly different, still inside of Spider-Man last year, which is still, we're going to do some different stuff with some of these weapons than maybe you're used to. And that's kind of part of the culture of that company.
Yeah, they recently released Sunset Overdrive on PC. And like, you can look at that trailer and it's like same crazy ass weapons or whatever.
Yep, that's what they do. And then they don't have to only do that, but that is what they do. So yeah, I think that's really what I wanted to talk to you about on this episode 3 of THABTO. The last thing I wanted to basically finish off with is, what are you looking forward to? We now know that you're looking forward to digital release of Endgame because you have managed to go between the gauntlet of spoilers out in the internet and out in the world, and more power to you. But is there anything else in the next little bit that you are really excited and pumped to see or do?
For what it's worth, just one more comment on Endgame. I'm going to watch it with my wife, and who's equally as excited, but has been spoiled up one side and down the other because she has a very big social media presence.
Of course, and more power to her for not accidentally spoiling you
or intentionally.
Well, you were probably on your best behavior for long periods of time there when she has that weapon over your head.
That's the weapon.
That's right. I can't imagine any fight where it's just like you say the wrong thing and she's like, "I'm going to tell you what happens to Thanos."
You know what's funny?
You're like,
I think that, like, we're in a mature relationship. We've had plenty of fights and torn each other apart, and from time to time, that would be considered crossing a line.
That's it. That's the divorce papers are filed.
I'm just saying.
Sure,
the thought of doing
sure,
that
sure.
is like, I think she had been like, no, I'd never do that. That's because I think it's because like there's no remedy.
Yeah, it's done. You're Darth Revan. What can you do?
I can't take that back.
This is when I really wish those Men in Black sticks existed for just really small purposes.
Yeah. Yeah. Seems like ultimately that technology would be abused.
Oh yeah. Oh, certainly. I mean, that's a government agency that has those. That isn't a great idea. Is there anything else that you're looking forward to? Is it primarily Endgame week for you?
Nothing that I can specifically think of. I think I'm probably going to pick up Fire Emblem, so I want to check that out because I am a big fan of this.
Definitely. You'll love it.
Other than that, no, I don't think so.
All right. Well, I'm pretty much in the same boat. I'm very much looking forward to Endgame. I saw it a number of times. You can see the postmortem on this channel. I really enjoyed that movie, and I'm looking forward to seeing it in my own pace at home with bathroom breaks in the middle of its 3-hour and 6-minute running time. But for the most part, at this point, now that Fire Emblem's out and I'm playing that, I'm engaged with that, I am basically counting the days till Control. Remedy has always been one of my favorite studios. Alan Wake is in my top 10 games of all time. I really enjoyed Quantum Break, even though I didn't like it quite as much as Alan Wake. And everything that I have seen about Control suggests to me it is Remedy at the top of its form. And I really can't wait to dive into that game. You tell me that you're making a Remedy game with paranormal powers in a Metroidvania type setting. The end of August can't come soon enough for that particular time.
I am looking forward to when is Planetfall comes out soon, right? August 6th.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, okay.
So that's soon. That's for anyone who doesn't know, that's the new Age of Wonders, but it's in space, so it's not magic. It's technology and alien races and stuff.
I love Age of Wonders. Yeah, I didn't realize it was that soon. That's awesome.
Yeah,
August is going to be great.
When they announced Planetfall, it felt like a very long time. When they announced it, I added it to my wish list. I can see this on Steam, which was 9/7/2018. So almost a year before it released.
So it was a long time. It didn't just feel
feel like a long time. Was a long time, but it comes out soon.
Well, this is great. So I love doing these episodes with you because I didn't realize that was that imminent. So that'll be interesting to balance a little bit because Fire Emblem really is that strategy part of the brand, and Age of Wonders is the same.
Totally.
So we'll work on that. But all right. Well, Tom, thank you so much for spending a couple hours with me talking about video games, talking about Joy-Con issues and spoilers, and making me remember bad things I did to you in my college years accidentally with respect to classic Star Wars video games. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, no, this is fun. I know we fell out of it a little bit. I'm hopeful that we can keep it up going forward.
Yeah. Well, as you say, we're adults. We got work. We got family. We got to do it when we can do it. But I think if we keep up a good clip, I think they're a lot of fun. So, yeah. Anything else you want to add?
I don't think so. I thought I was just I was scanning through my Steam wish list, and then I was going to go look at what is in their popular upcoming list to see if there was anything that I was forgetting.
All right.
But I don't think so.
Well, while you look at that for just another minute, I just want to tell people thank you for making
it. Coming.
Don't mock Cat Quest.
I'm not. Cat Quest is great. Its release date is currently pawing 2019.
Oh, cat puns. You can't do anything. You can't beat cat puns. Anyway, for everybody else that isn't interested necessarily in cat puns, thank you so much for hanging with us till the end of this slightly extended episode of THABTO. If you like this, please do like it. Please subscribe to this channel. We're talking about video games, information technology, postmortems on pop culture events like Lion King and Game of Thrones, and everything in between on a very regular basis. Otherwise, if you watch this on YouTube, thank you so much for watching. If you caught it on a podcast in podcast form, thank you so much for listening. Please do review it on that podcast service that you're listening to it on. Leave a comment. That does a great deal of help in extending the reach of the episodes and other content on this channel. Otherwise, Tom doesn't have a social media presence, so if you want to leave any disparaging comments about him or degrading his language usage or the way he sounds, please do leave those in the YouTube comments. I'm sure he'd be thrilled to see them.
I'll read them on Wednesday.
He'll read them on Wednesday after Endgame comes out. But thank you so much for hanging out with us. And we will catch you on the very next episode of Two Hoegs Are Better Than One. Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks, guys.